I owed my next film to Michel Simon. We both thought that the Fauchois play, Boudu Sauve des Eaux, had the makings of a splendid film, above all because of the possibilities which the role of Boudu offered Simon. The part, which was that of a layabout incapable of adapting himself to life, might have been made for that brilliant actor. Those are words from director Jean Renoir on his 1932 film, Boudu Saved from Drowning. Seeing Faces in Movies is a podcast where each month I focus on the works of a different director or cinematographer. And each week I invite a guest on to discuss a film and the artist's filmography. I'm your host, Felicia. Today we're talking about Boudu Saved from Drowning. So, very quick synopsis of the film is a bookseller saves a tramp from drowning and shelters him, but the tramp's odd behavior starts to wear everyone down. The film stars Michel Simon as Préat Boudu, Charles Granval as Edouard Lettingua, Marcel Enya as Emma Lettingua, and Séverine Lezonska as Chloe Anne-Marie. It's written by Jean Renoir, cinematography by Georges Asselin, directed by Jean Renoir, and edited by Suzanne Detroit and Marguerite Renoir. Today I have back on Ben Turnbull from the Franchisees podcast. And if you listen to the Douglas Sirk series, you'll recognize his name because we previously talked about what would be actually my favorite Cirque film, Written on the Wind. So I'm so glad to have you back for my Renoir series. Thank you so much for coming back, Ben.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me. I'm very happy to be back. And as you know, I've been using this opportunity to watch a lot of Renoir movies I hadn't seen. They're really good. you know, they're great. Yeah, the big one I hadn't seen, like the big canonical classic I hadn't seen, was Grand Illusion, and I watched that the other. And
Nice.
I feel like this is sort of a universal experience, like, when you encounter, some canonical work of art, that, you've never really encountered properly, you know a lot about it, maybe you know some of the plot or you know its reputation, but you've never actually experienced it, and then you watch it and you're like, "Oh, okay, like, yeah, I get it, it's so self-evidently amazing."
Yeah.
I almost sometimes I feel a little silly sometimes. Where it's like, why didn't I watch this before? Like, I watched Greed the other day, the famous, like, silent film,
Mm-hmm.
Monsterheim film, and also who is Axe in, The Grand Illusion is very good,
Mm-hmm.
um,
Yeah.
and I was watching it and I was like, "Oh, this is, like, the best movie ever," and then I had and then my brain was like, "Yeah, well, you moron, like, it is the best movie ever. It's been consistently called that for years, you know? This is not a thought."
I would say absolutely to yourself and to the listeners, do never beat yourself up about it because there's so many movies out there. It's also kind of nice to be like, oh, I have this really big film that I
Mhm.
haven't seen that I have on my plate to watch. So that's
Yeah.
a nice feeling.
Exactly. I don't think you should adhere too closely to any given canon, and take it as gospel. Like, you
Yeah.
do have to explore outside of that, find things for yourself, is very gratifying. But going through that, I watch a lot of these great movies, and every now and again, there is one where it's like, I did not at all, I don't think I appreciated that. I don't think I really understand why that's considered as good
Yeah.
as it is. So, it's okay, just be honest with yourself, I think. A lot of cinephiles are, like, not honest with themselves. They're
Yeah.
like, "I have to like this." Before they even sit down and watch it, they're like, "I have to like this. It's
I
important
know.
to like this. It's important for my persona as a cinephile." And it's like, "Oh, like, relax, just be yourself." And it do have some Renoir, honestly. Well, really only 1 or 2. For the most part, I mean, an incredible director.
Mhm.
These movies are insane. So yeah, I could talk to you about them, the ones I've seen if you'd like, yeah.
No, yeah, there's so much that you said that I wanna expand on, but, some that I'll just briefly touch upon because I wanna hear about what other films you've watched, but, for Renoir, because I do wanna get into his films being on a lot of lists and
Yes.
why that has turned people on and maybe off of his films, and why people's sentiment on his films is probably quite different from ours because we're actually watching more than just the 2 really, really, really big ones,
Mhm.
and we probably get what his mentality is a little bit more. As bad as that sounds, like, it makes me sound like you guys don't get it, but I
I might
am
not get
also
it. I'm not I'm not sure.
no, no, I feel like you do,
We'll
but
see. We'll see.
I am curious, though, what you have seen of his and what you had seen prior to being like, "I actually wanna do a deeper dive on his films," and then
Sure.
what led you to doing the deeper dives and what films you watched.
Yeah, absolutely. So up until you had asked me to be on, and I went on my little like Renoir kick. I had seen 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I had seen 6 of his movies. So
Mm,
I felt like okay, I know what I'm getting into. I think about Renoir being on a lot of those lists. So many of those lists are French, and
yes.
and if they're not literally French, they are filled with French people. Like the original, Rules of the Game, for example, is the only movie to be in the original Sight and Sound top 10 from the inception of the list. And I
Mhm,
think that's because, probably what, maybe even 50% of the critics are probably French from on that list. And they're right. I have to admit it.
mhm,
When you watch Rules of the Game and when you watch Grand Illusion, like they really are that great. But here, I'll tell you about my experiences. I'm pretty sure the
mhm.
first one I saw was Le Bête Humain, like the human beast. Which is kind of a weird first one to see, but I believe it was one of, if not the first Criterion DVDs I ever, found, uh, in the
Mm.
wild, and this would have been in Saskatoon, where I grew up, and, a lot of the times I'd go to the public library and I would rent these Criterion DVDs, but I'm pretty sure in this case, I actually bought it. Like, from I don't know, some place that sold DVDs. Maybe like
Oh,
a
wow.
drugstore that sold DVDs that somehow
Mhm,
like Criterion's. It was just this thing where you're, looking through these movies and you're like, "Why does that DVD look like that? It looks totally different than anything else I've seen." The only
mhm,
other time was the original Criterion release of Good Morning, the Ozu movie. I found it in a Blockbuster, used Blockbuster, and I was like,
mhm.
what is this? Why is it so weird looking? Um, and then I found out it's because it's the mark of quality, you know? It's a fancy DVD, of a French film. So I saw that, way back then, probably when I was, in early high school maybe, and
Okay.
I really remember it. I remember, Jean how do you say his name? Jean Gabin, or right? Is that
Mhm. Jean Gabin.
yeah, yeah, okay, good. I remember his face, covered in soot from the train, and I remember that it ends in tragedy, but I don't really remember it super well. And then it wouldn't have been until university when I saw Rules of the Game. I didn't they didn't show it to us in class, but the screening room movie theater in Kingston, Ontario, where I went to school, they were showing, all these classics. And so they showed Rules of the Game, and I 100%, did not get it. It's not like I didn't understand what he was going for or the actual, plot or the characters or anything like that. I just don't think I really it was like one of I was young. I was probably 18 or 19, and I saw
Mhm,
it, and I was like, I found that really hard to pay attention to. I don't think I
mhm,
was really watching a lot of older movies at that point. I had seen a lot of, to me were old movies, which were, 60s, 70s. I don't think I had seen very many movies from the 30s, and I
mhm.
think I really understood what made it great. And then I actually didn't watch it again until a few days ago. And after seeing all these other Renoir movies, and now I'm like, okay, I completely see why it's the greatest movie ever made. And and it feels like it also has a bit of that, very tempting, sort of mythology around it for cinephiles, where it's like it basically almost didn't exist. Like it
Yeah.
the production was like a nightmare. They made it, they cut it down, nobody liked it. All the French people were like, "Is this about me?"
Yeah.
Like that thing in Euphoria where like, "Is this play about us?" Like, they got so offended, painting with a broad brush, but just from what I read, like, people were, like, really upset, which I think is so funny. And then, the negative gets lost in the war, and then they're reconstructing it, and it's not until, like, like, almost 20 years later that it actually has this great reputation. Then A Day in the Country, I first watched in 2015, and then I was really lucky to see I went to the Nitrate Picture Show in Rochester, New York in 2024,
Mm.
and that was part of their program. They had a beautiful 35 millimeter nitrate print of A Day in the Country. It was like a mystical, beautiful,
Yes.
strange film. I think is kind of on the same level as his like Rules the Game, and I would say also Boudu is on the same level for me.
Mhm.
The thing with A Day in the Country, also has this kind of, like, addendum to it or asterisk, like, that makes it, um, so tempting and so mysterious is that it's, like, essentially an unfinished film
Mhm. Yep.
and is very messy, I guess, in that sense, but that is such like, beguiling movie, and,
Mhm.
also, reminds me of the ending of Boudu, like, on the water, um, you know, and yeah, so I think I really love that one. Um, even though it is kind of strange and sort of unfinished, I guess.
Mhm.
And then at the Lightbox in 2018, I saw the Crime of Monsieur Lange.
Okay.
Um, I
Wow.
I don't really remember much about it, but I remember really liking it. I remember at that time thinking, "Yeah, Renoir, like, I get it." But I don't really remember anything about it, except that it's like a lot of his movies, like, very humanist and, very still in operating in that poetic realism kind of mode, I guess. The River I watched last year for the first time. I would like to
Mhm.
watch it again because I don't think I was in the right mood, and this was one sort of what I was talking about before, where finally watch this, like, canonical film, and then I kinda didn't like it, and,
Yeah.
it's the cinematography, obviously very beautiful, the Technicolor is insane. I mean, part of it is, like, it's, kind of a paternalistic, colonialist kinda lens. um,
Mhm. Mhm.
I wouldn't necessarily say well, it is kinda racist, like, not in, like, the, vitriolic sort of,
Yes.
hateful way, but in a like I say, in kind of a colonialist way. Um,
Yeah. It's a little bit, yeah, like, naive.
yeah, it's a little naive, yeah, but he's kind of a naive guy,
Very
it
much.
and, so I do kinda wanna watch that again, but I didn't, I don't know, I didn't really like it as much. Um, Also last year, I watched one of his American movies, and I had no idea I guess I never really looked at it as, like, with Letterboxd. I did not know he came
He
to
went to
America,
America? Yeah.
yeah, during World War II and made, like, I don't know, like, 5 American movies or something, so I watched The Southerner, and it's great, and also has
I
a very,
know.
is about, has a beautiful water scenes that are reminiscent of Boudu as well. Um, oh, yeah, it's at some point in there, I watched Boudu. I don't remember when. I had seen it before this. I think also it would have been 2024 when I watched it. Okay, and then now, after I get the assignment for Voodoo Saved from Drowning, I'm like, "Okay,
Mhm.
here we go, let's get into it." So I watched Swamp Water, um,
Yes.
and I
I
like
wanna hear your thoughts on that.
I think it's good. I don't think it's like
I thought it was good too.
yeah,
People
I don't
hate
think
it.
it's I don't know why, I don't think
It's
it's a
fine.
masterpiece or anything, but I think
No.
it's a movie, and also Walter Brennan is a swamp man. So,
Yes.
how could you not like a movie where he's Oh, and I feel like I have to do another impression every episode at least. So I'll do, because
Please. You
usually he's
have to do Walter Brennan.
"Hey, dude,
Please, 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 please.
there's gold in them there hills," you know? He's like, "There's gold over there." But then in this one, he's like, "Hey, stay out of my swamp," right? He's kind of like Shrek. He's like, "Hey, get out of my
Mm,
swamp."
I mean, very much.
Oh, and then when they're
Oh, no, I'm gonna let you finish, but I don't know.
Okay.
I'll pose this question, you can answer it as you're finishing your did you see the remake? Because Walter Brennan once again reprises his role in the
There's a
remake.
remake of Swamp Water?
Yes.
No.
It's by, Jean Negulescu, but
Oh,
it's an American film. It's the
yeah.
exact same, but Walter Brennan reprises it. And I think both are good. People are like, "Well, if I had to pick one, I'm gonna pick the Renoir one." And the Renoir one's a little bit better, but, Walter Brennan is in both. A big reason why I love doing this show is hearing people's stories about
Hmm.
how they what is watch the film, what led them to watch a film. Because I think, lists are a big reason why people might watch a film like this, um, and I kinda give a bit of I do give a bit of more background in the first episode that I will release on this, which is, Rules of the Game, but I kinda wanna cliff notes reiterate why I feel so, defensive of Hannah, and I think that
Yeah,
he's very much a filmmaker that requires sometimes you might in quotes, you might require a second watch.
sure.
Because a lot of films, sometimes you do require a second watch, and sometimes the second watch, you watch and you're like, "I don't like this movie anymore," but sometimes on the second watch, you're like, "Oh, I do like it." And I appreciate it because I'm not spending my time to try to understand what the point is, without trying to sound, pretentious. I think that he is someone who requires a second watch, but, getting into the film itself, because 'cause we're talking about Boudu Saint
Oh,
from
yeah. Let
Drowning.
me add one quick thing,
Please, please.
I actually I finish off my little journey because I also watched The Lower Depths, This Land Is La Chienne, Night at the Crossroads, The Golden Coach, and Grand Illusion. So
The
I've
Lower
been
Depths is so good, right?
yeah, I've been working in the Renoir mines, chipping away,
Yeah.
you know? I did know I did like the lo all these things so many of these movies, are so beautiful and
Yes.
so humanist and so kind to their characters and to the audience,
Yes.
so generous. Like, that's what I think when I think about Renoir is this, like, generosity of spirit.
Mhm.
And I assumed maybe because of the title and because of the source material that The Lower Depths was going to be, like, pretty depressing, but
Mhm.
it's actually fairly light while dealing
Yep.
with very serious, weighty themes,
Mhm.
Similarly with This Land Is Mine, which is sort of like one of his American films and a
Mhm.
propaganda film in 1943 about, what it would be like to resist, like a fascist, occupation. And I was watching that, just over the past couple of weeks, and like ICE, in America snatching people off the streets, shooting them in the back and everything. And, I know we're in Canada and everything, but I was kinda like, "This is what it feels like a little bit." Like, you wanna be Charles Laughton in This Land Is Mine. Very generous with his characters, I think. Even in something like
Yes.
Chen, which is quite brutal and ends in a very brutal murder. um,
Mhm.
well, we'll talk about Le Chien because it sort of leads right into Boudu. Like,
Mhm.
there's, one interview I was reading of it, it seems like Michel's how do you say his last name? Is it Simon?
Sumo, yeah.
Yeah, Michel Simon, it almost seems like he walks out of the ending of Boudu, right? Yeah. Night at the Crossroads, I thought was, maybe more interesting as, like, a curio, but, I found it kinda difficult to follow along, but it looks incredible. And I
Mhm.
think he kinda disowned it a little bit, but it's such a beautiful looking movie, and one of the best, like, car chases I've seen in, like, old '30s movie. And then Golden Coach and Grand Illusion, I think are also just like one thing you were saying about feeling like you kinda have to come back and give it a second watch. I think that's true for a few of his films in particular, but
Yeah.
generally speaking, like, the American ones, obviously, I think are just by virtue of being in English language, are gonna be easier for, English language speaking audience to internalize and for the, themes to be understood a little bit easier.
Mhm.
But I think his movies are some of his movies are very didactic, not in a bad way, and they wear their heart on their sleeves. Um, And so it's kind of easy to I think you just have to get over this, like, prejudice in your mind of, like, "I'm gonna watch a
Mhm.
old French movie." Like, yeah, a lot of old French movies are really boring. I understand. This is not
Yep.
one of the cases, you know? Um, and then I would say for me, the exception to that is Rules of the Game, which I think is actually, like, a very complicated movie, um, with a lot of levels of sincerity and irony being blended together, and a film that is still extremely generous to its characters and does not treat them solely as a mockery, or a
Mhm.
setup, but if that's a tough movie, like, I feel like that movie, I even need to I don't think I've really fully cracked it, like, it's just
Mhm.
there's just so much going on in it, and that's when you could just kinda that's why it's, like, the one to see. That's why it's number 5 on the list or whatever, of the greatest whatever.
By the time I got to film school, they were like, "Oh, you have to watch Rules of the Game and The Grand Illusion," and I was like, "I already know it all." Uh,
Yeah.
but, like, watching Grand Illusion and the Rules of the Game with a class of, probably 18, 9-year-old 19-year-olds because it was, like, one first year or second year where we were still teenagers, and me being, like, so enraptured by it, but, like and not that I was I got it more than others, it was just, like, this gravitated towards me more than, like, other films that other people thought were fantastic that I maybe didn't, and people just were, like, so bored by Rules of the Game and Grand
Yeah,
Illusion, and I was like,
I see that.
I don't understand. You guys don't understand the commentary on war on both of these.
I think I can totally get that with Rules of the Game. Grand Illusion, is despite sort of famously being like a war movie without any, combat, and without any, actual, fighting at all, is like such a, like, text for all of these types of movies people do love, like World War II movies, but specifically, prisoner of war movies, like, I don't know, Great Escape and Stalag 17, this stuff. It all stems from this movie, and it's not a slow movie. It's filled with incident, it's filled with drama, and it has so many beautiful moments that I think are so universal and so easy and so, deeply felt that I can't really imagine somebody being bored by it.
Um, for Boudu,
Mhm.
Save from Drowning, this is early in his filmography, before a lot of the films that we've already mentioned so far in this film. So this film comes out in 1932. And in true Renoir fashion, it's a short film. We love a 90 minutes or under film. It's a film, it's in the Criterion Collection. So for people who know the Criterion Collection, that has some sort of marker, but it's still not a huge film. And
Mhm.
I think that people who are like, okay, maybe I liked the two Renoir films that I liked, the Rules of the Game, Grand Illusion, I wanna see more, probably then gravitate towards hearing about Buddha Sane from Drowning. So, this is a film that, Renoir adapted from a play from René Fauchois, and it was a play that played in France, but what Renoir did was that he only really kept the first 2 acts of the play, and then he changed the rest and put his own very personal stamp on it. If I didn't know that it was adapted from a play. I would think that he had written it completely himself because it feels so very Renoir, especially if you have seen his other films. It feels very much like his own story because he is so fascinated with the idea of the bourgeoisie and the middle to lower class and how and their dynamics and how they interact. And he's so fascinated with portraying that through dialogue. A lot of his films are very dialogue heavy, and the difference between himself and someone like a Bergman, who is also dialogue heavy,
Mhm.
is that there's a lot more action. So as you get people in you know, Parisian backgrounds walking around or interacting with their outer world as opposed to being in the home. There are a lot of scenes in the apartment that one of the characters owns, but a lot of it is just like them being outside and interacting with their elements. I want to preface this by saying that I said this before, I'm a huge Renoir person, but I and the audience cannot see these books, but I owned already a few books. So I own his autobiography,
Ooh.
My Life in Film, which is a fascinating read. I would highly recommend if you're even not even if you're specifically interested in Renoir, if you're interested in a filmmaker who is so honest about his art and his upbringing, because he is from the bourgeoisie, like, he grew up with money, but his father was
He's
an
a
artist.
nepo baby, yeah, but he's one of the classic nepo babies of cinema.
Exactly. It's not that his dad was, like, this huge businessman. His dad was an artist, but his dad was an
Yeah.
artist who was making money.
Yes.
That's how he was able to be
Not a
like,
starving
"I can
artist.
make a film." He
Yeah.
was like, "Yeah, that makes sense." And it's so fascinating to read about his, because in this book specifically, he does talk about the films he made, but he's mostly talking about who he was, what led him to be so sensitive. Because, like you said, something you mentioned about how he attacks films or how he goes about making films is a feels very humanist. There's a sensitivity about how he or talks about characters, whether it's the bourgeoisie or the quote unquote lower class. So the best thing about Hanwal was that he was so open and so willing to talk to people. So that's why, like, when you go on Criterion Channel and you maybe have
Yes.
seen the interview with, like, it's
I
not even an
did.
interview,
Yeah.
it's a conversation between him and Michel Simon where they talk about the film, where he was just so happy to talk about films. Um, so I think that when we talk about this film and him putting his own stamp on the film, it feels very modern, probably of the time, and it feels very French.
It's extremely French. It's exceedingly French, yes.
It's interesting. I haven't read the play, but to hear that a lot of it was changed, and I know I was so interested in Michel Simon as an actor and his portrayal of Boudu. I'm wondering how you feel about, the idea that he is making a film about a character that's not easy to watch. A lot of people don't like to watch characters that they like a protagonist that they feel like I can root for this person.
Yeah.
And maybe some people are rooting for Badu. I personally, and I'll get into it why I'm not, but that doesn't mean I don't like the film. I can watch a film where I absolutely hate every character.
Some great films, are like that, right?
Exactly, but I'm wondering how you feel about, a film of the time, because this is a different era of cinema where people are typically having the protagonist be someone that you want to root for and that you're on the board for, and he's making a character that is, or he's portraying a character that it can be messy and nasty at times
Oh, yeah.
and still make a compelling film. So what are your thoughts on his portrayal of something like that?
Yeah, well, my selling point to anybody who hasn't seen this and is interested in watching it is that it has one of the single greatest performances of all time. And no qualifiers, not comedic performance, not this, not that. I think one of the single greatest performances in a movie is Michel Simon as Boudu. And it's always hard to say how influential something actually is. Like, does this lead to this, lead to this? It's not necessarily linear, right? But I
Yeah.
feel like it's gotta be hugely influential. 1932, there's a lot of movies that I haven't seen from 32, or from the 30s in general, but I don't think there's that many performances like this. that
Mhm.
are this off the chain, you know? I don't there's something extremely modern about it, and also something that's very much of its time. It is very theatrical, I think. And then I would also say it has one of the greatest endings of all time. And I mean, really genuinely, like, the last 5 minutes or whatever, the last 10,
Yeah.
whatever it is. As for how I feel about Boudu and how I feel about, like, spending so much time with a character like this, I love it. It's it I love it so much. I would say, when people say dudes rock, they have
Yeah.
the whole dudes rock thing. I think that's kinda stupid. But in this case, I would say "Ba-dudes rock." Does that make sense? That's my
I
point of
mean,
the episode.
I'm gonna say that's
Oh,
literally why I asked you to be
oh,
on
'cause
this
that was my
episode, so sorry to
letterbox.
review.
I say it somewhat ironically because I think the problem with the whole dudes rock thing is that, yeah, there are great movies where it's dudes hanging out and rocking. Okay,
Mhm.
granted, of course. Um, but there are so many more movies where dudes are definitively not rocking, are doing awful things. Are committing heinous acts and are being bad people. And further, I would say that a lot of the behavior in these quote unquote "dudes rock" movies is actually the same. Is very toxic and very bad. And this is just part of the essence of being a dude, and being a
Yeah.
dude in this case. You know, I read some reviews where people are like what, Tommy Lee Jones said to Jim Carrey on the set
Yeah.
and Forever, "I cannot sanction your buffoonery." I can understand people watching this and not being able to handle spending time with Boudu because he's
Yeah.
not it and it's not that it's so over the top that he's, like, not a person. He's a real
Yeah.
guy, but he's a force of nature. And in completely destructive, completely
Yes.
disgusting, complete disregard for, any social niceties, and
Mhm.
also, and as we mentioned, this is very French, he's also
Mhm.
a sex pest, right? He's
Yes.
he's a classical French pervert.
Yeah.
The irony, of course, being that we are introduced to his, savior and benefactor, the, bourgeois, bookshop owner Lestingois, we're introduced with him grabbing ass, and being
Yes.
being a perv, and, he's having this affair with his maid, also in classical French fashion. I think Renoir talks about how after Le Chien, he and, Michel Simon were thinking of something to do, like some other movie. And I think Michel Simon had suggested, "What about Boudu?" And Renoir was like, "Oh, I don't really, it's a fine play, but I'm not really that interested in it."
Mhm.
And then he thought, "Okay, well, what if it's just a vessel to capture the essence of Michel Simon? Like, what if it's just a character study and we just let this guy loose, right?" And if you go on the Wikipedia for this movie, like, there's a quote. I'm just gonna quote part of it, okay? I'm sure
Please do. I'm glad you're bringing it up.
it's very funny, and this is a quote from the Wikipedia of the movie about Simon. It says, Michel Simon was at various times a boxer, a boxing instructor, a right-wing anarchist, a frequenter of prostitutes, pimps, and petty crooks. He was extremely well-read, a talented photographer, a hypochondriac, a misanthrope, owner of a vast collection of pornography, and with a reputation for unorthodox sexual behavior, which he did not bother to deny. The writer Richard Boston stated that whether or not he was a pleasant man, he was certainly a complex one, with a good deal of Boudu in him. And Renoir called Simon a genius of an actor. Boudu was conceived primarily to make use of the genius of Michel Simon. And I think that's so apparent, right? Because he is this movie. Um,
Yeah.
it is such a huge performance, not just in its theatricality or over the topness, but the presence of Badu, and how he insinuates himself into the lives of this
Mhm.
French family, which is totally different from some of the other movies it may have inspired. Like, I think a lot about Tiorama, the Pasolini movie, right?
Oh, yeah. Gosh,
Which I
yeah.
know at least 1 or 2 critics have said is sort of like has some sort of, threads from Boudu, right? But in that movie, you know, the character coming in and uprooting the bourgeois family and sleeping with everybody in the family, there's this mysterious, sort of threatening element to it. It's a force of nature, Terence Stamp. It's this kind of like alchemical, mysterious, vaguely threatening sort of energy. Um, and and it feels like it's some sort of punishment rained down from the heavens or something, or like he's like a witch of some kind. And in this movie, it's not at all like that. Boudou did not choose to do this. It's all incidental. He's easy come, easy go, right? As they say at the end of the movie, when he floats off in the river, the currents have taken him. Like he's a tumbleweed, right? He's the dude. He's the Boudu. He just goes with the flow. And that's what I find so funny about this movie. And this is part of the skewering of like liberalism and do-gooderism and so on, right? Is that, Lestingois has completely put himself in this own situation. At any point, he could just make Boudu leave, but he loves Boudu and he gets off on it. I don't mean in necessarily sexual, although that's sort of part of it. Um, there's this psychological element where he is restrained by his middle class or upper middle class morality and whatever social mores, right? And he sees in Boudu this freedom and that he can sort of live vicariously through, even if he himself would never really quite get to that level. And then Boudu sort of, especially by the end of the movie, you see, he is kind of also comfortable with some of the trappings of the bourgeois lifestyle. Like when he start to become Lestingois a little bit and like shaves his beard and when he's pretending like he's the bookshop owner,
Mhm.
you know, like there is this symbiotic relationship. Of course, the difference being that Lessingois will never become Boudu, and Boudu can very easily go back to being Boudu at the drop of a hat or the flipping of a boat, right?
Where do I even start? This is why I love talking to you because I feel like we're so in sync, and I just love that you are so into the films that
I
we're
love this
talking
movie.
about, and just actually passionate about it. Because like, everything you're saying, like, again, the audience can't see, but I'm, like, vigorously nodding my head too.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, there is so much that you said that I wanna at least comment on, and then we can expand on. There's one thing that I wanna save to expand on, so I'll say that first,
Mhm.
about him being a sex pest
Yeah.
and him and the sexuality in this film. So I'm gonna save that because that's part of my 3rd segment. So I'm just gonna comment on that and say that I acknowledge it, and we'll throw it back to the 3rd. In terms of this type of character and as an artist director taking into account, like, "Hey, I wanna work with this actor, and let me take into account who he or this person is as just in real life and blend this in." Is so interesting to me because, again, we don't really we probably do get that now, but people are more hesitant to acknowledge that, like, "Yeah, I'm this much of an asshole. That's why I was cast as this person." It's still in the early ages of cinema and actors as celebrity and actors as a name that you're calling, and you're like, "I have you in my film because I want people to gravitate towards you," or whatnot. I think that it's absolutely hilarious reading about his personal life, Michel Simon, and it's so funny, but weird and sad and disturbing and weird.
Well, when I read that in the Wikipedia, like, I am sure there's some awful shit in there.
I'm sure.
It's best to just get the doubt.
I was like, "I don't wanna dive any deeper than that. I
No.
don't wanna know," because I'm already uncomfortable about him as an actor. and by uncomfortable doesn't mean I dislike. It just means that it's someone who makes me uncomfortable, and that's probably the point of his performances. But I think that it's interesting to meld those 2 together, whereas people now feel like, "Oh, I need to be so different from the character I play. That's how I win my Oscar." And I think Renoir is very, very, very much the director to understand that. He is so in tune with humans and personality, and I think it's because, especially if you read, his autobiography, My Life and My Films, you can hear about him talking about his upbringing and how he was kind of a little bit segregated, but so immersed in the film world, or not film, but art world because of his dad. So there is a sensitivity that comes with that, and just being so fascinated by personalities that were so outside of the people that he knew. So there's, like, a few people that he talks about in his books who were considered, like, the lower class, like, the children of lower class people that his were employed by his father, and they had kids, and he was so fascinated by those boys or girls and just how they behaved and how they shaped the characters in his films, and you can see them in the films that he makes, and it's so fascinating that it never feels that's my next question. If and it feels like a lot of his films are commentaries on the bourgeoisie, but it never feels like he's, like, outright saying they're bad people.
No.
He's saying, "This is how they are, sometimes they can't help it," and then he's saying, "This is how the middle or lower class are, and sometimes they can't help it," and it just feels very matter of fact, but because of how sentimental he is, he's able to blend that comedy, and that's why they're easy to watch. Wondering how you feel about the commentary between a man who he's a bookseller, Lantingla is a bookseller, but he's still well off. He has money. He saves Boudu from drowning.
He is a hero.
There you
Yeah.
go, he brings him in, and it's like, "Hey, this is my lifestyle."
Yeah, yeah. I no, I definitely agree. I think there's actually a good chat between Eric Romer and Jean Duchette on the Criterion Channel.
Mhm.
Duché, I don't know. I'm so bad at these French names, and it's part of one of those like French TV shows. Like it actually set up kind of like they're sitting in the seats. It looks like they're
Yeah.
like Ebert and Siskel and
I
Ebert.
saw that, yeah.
Yeah, except that it's, like, much more academic, and it's from, like, 30, 40 years before that show existed. They do rightly point out that Lestingui's is a hero, I mean, like, yes, he is, the reason he sees Boudu is he's staring out of his telescope, and actually there's another interview with Jean-Pierre Gorin who's talking about the skewering of liberalism, and he says, Lestinguis looking at the telescope, like, at this quote unquote, the perfect tramp, the perfect specimen, Boudu, like he's a colonizer in a pith helmet, like, surveying, like, the natives or something, like, there's that element to him, like, he is sort of looking down on, like, the lower depths, right? And but, something else that Romer says is that he finds Renoir's films contain both the most pessimistic, harshest views of humanity and also the most comforting and humanist, and these are juxtaposed, but they're never reconciled, and I think that's what's so interesting about his movies. Like you say, he is sort of just showing you, like, this is sort of these are my observations. This is how these people act. They're not out and out villains, with some exceptions, of course, like in certain movies. But even in something like
Yeah.
Something like Grand Illusion is a great example.
Mhm.
I had never seen the movie, and I had seen the poster, and I see Eric von Stroheim with the monocle, and I know he's like
Yeah.
Colonel von Reifenstein or whatever, and I'm like, "Oh, okay. He's gonna be an arch, like,
Mhm.
I guess I know it's World War I, not World War II, but he's gonna be like an arch sort of Nazi coded, fascist German villain." But that's not at all what happens in the movie. He's a figure of German nobility who is like, melancholy about the end of European nobility in the face of the destruction of World War I. And
Mhm.
he's just another guy. He's a human being, you know? And all these movies have that. This movie in particular, Lestonguois is shown as being a bit of a hypocrite, right? Maybe a bit of a pseudo intellectual, maybe. Like he doesn't necessarily practice what the books that he loves preach. And Boudu at the same time is shown to be, a complete chaotic, agent of chaos, a complete nightmare, complete like Tasmanian devil whirling through everything and destroying everything. I don't begrudge anybody who doesn't feel this way, but he's extremely charming, right? I think. I know it's not necessarily how everybody feels, but there is something there is desirable to him and to his way of life, I think. Can I quote something from this essay from the Christopher Faulkner from
Please,
Criterion?
please.
Um, so he does talk about sort of how Boudu wanders out of La Chaîne and into or sorry, the character Michel Simon plays sort of ends with La Chaîne and goes into Boudu, but we can talk about that when you do the other section, like about the before and
Mhm.
after. But here's a quote from him from this essay. Both Lestingbois and Boudu know their world, their city, very differently. One observes it, one acts in it. One is an eye at rest, the other a body in motion. One is static, sedentary, the other mobile, a pedestrian. One is rational, reflective, bound to time, the other impulsive, corporeal, a creature of space. One is forever stable at home, the other forever displaced in public. This is the phenomenology of their separate ways of being in the world. There is a sense that Boudu exteriorizes something that is in Lestingbois himself, that the bookseller has summoned him up from the dark reaches of the personal and social unconscious. Boudu is everything at the center of the self and within society that has been discarded, ignored, or repressed. This, quote, Boudu belongs to filth, to waste, to the unassimilable. It's a tough one to pronounce. He is an instinct, an urge, a drive. Blah, 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 blah. This Boudu is something savage, so says Madame Lestingbois, summoned involuntarily that both attracts and repels in equal measure, and over which Lestingbois has no control, as the balance of the film proves. Which is also sort of just what I was talking about a bit. Like it does genuinely seem like he's just sort of manifested Boudu, like he's doing his regular he's having his regular French day where he's like flirting with the maid, like, "Hey, we're gonna have sex later." you know that's part of the job. And then he's looking out his window with his telescope, and before he sees Boudou and is like, "Oh, what a great what a perfect tramp," he's looking at the ladies and their ankles, and he's being like a
Yeah.
disgusting French guy. And then he spots him and he saves him, but does he save him out of some sense of obligation to his fellow man, or is it to collect that perfect specimen? Does he already recognize, you know, this person maybe unconsciously represents something I aspire to be, but can never get close to. And yeah, he Boudou, like as soon as he comes over too, like basically as soon as they resuscitate him, he's just on a tear. Like, he's sitting down and eating sardines with his hands. He's just like rubbing his filth all over the place. He's just disgusting, right?
Yeah.
Like you were saying, like with the classes, like even in something that is as vicious and as precise as rules of the game, uh,
Mhm.
where there's like the famous hunting scene where they're showing the so-called elites of society just wantonly slaughtering defenseless animals,
Yeah.
and directly comparing those animals to lower classes. Um, there are so many other scenes where they reveal themselves to be like thoughtful people with feelings, and something that in so many of the imitators of that movie, like even like I haven't seen this in a long time, but something like Gosford Park. But I think the satire of the rules of the game is so much more precise and more accurate because they are recognizable people, because they are not caricatures.
Yes.
Right? He's not a caricaturist. Even something like Boudu, which feels like a caricature, is presented as a flesh and blood real guy in this movie. And in there, I mean, well, we'll get into some of the remakes of this or whatever, but there's something missing from a lot of movies that try to do satire like this, where they think they can overcompensate by just going really far.
Renoir's stamp on that and why it's so compelling because another filmmaker could make this film
Mhm.
and it would be completely different. And I think
Oh yeah.
it ties back to what was mentioned before and his upbringing. Hear Renoir himself talk about his upbringing and the people that he was closest to and the people that he talks with such intense love about. These were all people that were so and so called the help,
Mhm.
but in his mind, these were the loves of his life. Like he didn't know any different because he's a child, right?
Right.
And it's so obvious in his films, especially something I know we're not talking about the rules of the game. I know we're not talking
It's
about
hard
that,
not to relate things back to it. It's such
but
a
it
kind of
I think exactly. I think it's so hard not to talk about something like rules of the game because like Voodoo is leading up to him
mhm,
making rules of the game, and I talk about this in my rules of the game episode where he was able to make that film because that Bet Human was such a enormous hit
mhm,
that he was given free rein to make whatever he wanted, and then he made rules of the game, which, the French people absolutely detested.
yeah.
Um, but he was talking about people realistically, and sometimes people are not ready to see themselves in a realistic form, and I think people also didn't like Voodoo when it came out. If you read anything about it, that it was, like, a huge problem and people were not happy about seeing a character that was so, in their mind, disgusting, and I get it, like, I get that mentality because I also feel it's when I'm watching the film, it's hard for me not to be like, "Oh, this character is so gross," but he feels so real.
I guess the French call it a clochard, right? Or clochard, like a tramp.
Mhm,
And um, I think it's a pretty different, pretty far removed from our modern conception of like, an unhoused person, like, somebody who's panhandling or somebody
mhm.
who is in a precarious situation. It's not really, it's hard to compare it to like what our modern day conception of that is like, and how different society is, and also how differently society treats marginalized people like that these days.
Yeah,
I'm sure in 1930s France, I mean, this is like also like the French Depression as well, like that, it was not easy. Uh, I'm
mhm.
I'm sure that it was, whatever systems they had in place were insufficient, but it was also a sort of a different time. I think people my assumption is that maybe society had not swept everybody under the rug in the same way that it feels like like our modern society does. That maybe, like, interacting with whatever a French clochard from the '30s may have been a more common experience than, what our experience, would be with homeless people today. So it's kind of hard to imagine what, like, a modern Badoo would be like.
I do wanna get into the 2nd segment, and I do wanna get into the 3rd one, which also ties into my thoughts on Voodoo. So what he does right before this, which is also still 1932, is a film called Night at the Crossroads. This is considered kind of like an early film noir, even though it's before the genre actually exists, but it's a film, a crime film that's French. It stars his brother
Mhm,
in this film, another Renoir. It's not a well-known film. It's not terribly difficult to find. You can find, um, an a copy on YouTube or
rarefilm.com? You can find it. Yeah, it's not in great quality, but it's not bad.
I don't typically talk about, the before, but I think it's kind of prevalent here is
Definitely.
talking about what he did even just before Night of the Crossroads, which is La Chienne, and, translated in English is The Bitch.
The bid.
Um,
Yeah, it's funny that they don't translate that it's not known by
I
its
know.
title.
And
But yeah, important to note, it's Lachant the feminine version with like 2 N's and an E. Yeah, which I thought, which I yeah, I was like, I thought bitch in French was like salut, like, but I guess that is maybe more typical. Maybe that's whore. Anyway.
but, it's technically his 2nd sound film. So he did,
Mm.
a film called, Un Pur Bébé, which is a film that
Yeah.
you will never find.
Oh, no, no,
But that
you can find it.
can you?
Yeah, 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 I almost watched it. Emperor's Bébé, aka Baby's Laxative, which is a very enticing title. It
That's what
stars
they
Mich
call it in English?
that's the translation. It's an extra on the Criterion disc of La Chienne, um, and, uh, and therefore also on the Criterion channel. It's only an hour long. I meant to watch it, but I haven't got around to it.
Okay. Okay, good to know. I'm gonna have to watch that because I didn't realize it was on the Criterion Channel. But Shanna's probably is definitely more seen than Night at the Crossroads.
Mhm.
Because I don't think Night at the Crossroads is a Criterion release, but The Shan is. And as you've mentioned, Michel Simon is in The Shan, and it very much seems like his character, even though because I watched the 2 of them close enough together, like, a few weeks apart, but close enough that I'm like, there is a difference between his character that he plays in The Shen and Boudu, but you could see how someone like that could end up on the streets for a few years and end up being Boudu.
Yeah, yeah, so, like, Le Chien briefly is it was also remade in the States as Scarlet Street, which I've never seen. The Edward G.
The
Robert.
first line?
Yeah, yeah. Uh,
Yeah.
so I'll definitely try to watch that soon, but, yeah, Le Chien is, like, basically this sort of ineffectual, kind of losery kind of guy played by Michel Simon, who is like a pretty comfortable middle class guy, falls in love with a sex worker who is then basically takes advantage of him along with her pimp. They take advantage of him for money and lead him along, and eventually, he finds out, he snaps, he kills her. It gets blamed on the pimp. The pimp goes to jail, gets executed. However, the Michel Simon character, basically this ruins his life. The experience, the guilt, whatever. His marriage falls apart. He loses his job. He becomes a tramp on the streets. And there's this ironic twist at the end where they're clearing out the former house he lived in, or the former house of the lady he fell in love with, and they're carting away his paintings because he was an amateur painter, and and he finds like $1 on the street. It's like, oh my god, we can have a feast, and he sort of transforms into like a Boudu type character. I don't mean like literally they're the same character, like obviously not. The performance, Michel Simon's performance is so different, except for in the last 5 minutes of Le Chien where he all of a sudden turns into Boudu.
At the last point on this, and this is very gonna be very brief because neither of us have seen this movie,
Yes.
but what he did right after this in 1933 is a film called, in French, it's called Chateau Regency, and in English, it's Chateau and Company. It's a French comedy, and, it's not quite it's quite difficult to find,
Mhm.
and reading about his thoughts on it, he doesn't have many memories of making it at all.
Yeah.
It's kind of been described as like a light comedy about class relations, which is not. dissimilar to what he's been known to make, so it seems very in line to the Renoir stamp, but, I read someone describe it as kind of somewhat like, David Lean's Hobson's Choice, which I don't know if you've seen that.
No, I've been meaning to, yeah. Uh, Charles Laughton, Wyatt is in that, right?
Yes, that's because you mentioned Charles Laughton earlier, and I was
Uh,
like, "Oh, that's so funny because that's something, related to this." I think Hobson's Choice is great. I absolutely adore David Lean. I'm a huge David Lean fan, um, outside of Lawrence of Arabia, but
oh, you don't like Lawrence of Arabia?
I don't care for it.
Have you seen it in the theater? You gotta see it on the big screen.
That's what I
Oh,
hear, that's what I hear.
also, like,
Uh,
yeah, I know.
I don't dislike it, I don't
Yeah.
dislike it. It's funny because I watched it for the first time during the pandemic, when everyone was at home and
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah,
everyone's like, "Okay, I gotta watch that one
yeah,
movie this long."
yeah.
So, I watched I was like, "You know what? It's time. I'm gonna watch Lawrence of Arabia." Okay, so I'm gonna pivot very quickly to the last
Yeah,
part,
go
and
ahead.
then I will get to the Okay, so for the last segment, trademarks, but I wanted to talk about kind of his interest in talking about the bourgeoisie without criticizing them as a class, because it's a class that he's well versed in. I think it takes a emotionally mature human being to be like, I can see what's going on here, but also understand that sometimes those people might not fully be aware that they're assholes, and I
Mm.
think that's very much who Noah is and, like, in terms of how he portrays characters, and you can see it in this film in Boudu. I'm wondering how you feel about how he portrays higher classes and how they're not outright villains.
Sort of what I was talking about before, like, he's, a very generous filmmaker and, a very humanist filmmaker, and something I noticed is a through line in all these movies, though is muddled a little bit in something like Rules of the Game, which is perhaps why it's so successful, is you're totally right. Like, he doesn't he if these are not vicious cookie cutter style satires where it's like we have a broad caricature of a rich person who is just completely villainous and completely ignorant and completely cruel, you know. I'm not saying that those don't have their place. Of course they do. Some great movies about people who are just absolutely, completely out of touch and completely incapable of interacting meaningfully with somebody who's outside of their class. And that's very funny. And that's also very true to life. I work in customer service, and I've worked in customer service most of my life. And, as many assumptions and stereotypes as you can gather over the years about what this kind of person's like or this kind of person's like, the thing that has always rung true is class, right? That people of a certain class will treat you like garbage, if for no other reason than because they can get away with it. And you can pathologize about it. You can say, well, they're doing this to project their own to reaffirm their own sense of superiority, sometimes it's very clear, it's very brazen how they do it, so I'm not at all letting people off the hook or saying, like, the 1% are, like, actually really thoughtful if you get to know them, blah, blah, blah. Um, but these aren't necessarily the people Renoir is making movies about. He's not making a movie about, Elon Musk or whatever. He's made for a topical example. Um, he's making movies about people who are complicated. You think of in Grand Illusion, like the Colonel von Rauffenstein and I don't remember the character's name, but the other guy from a higher class, the other kind of officer from a higher class, not Jean Gabin, but the other guy. Um,
Yeah.
and they have this. There is this fraternity they have that by being the same class, that is actually shown very humanely and very beautifully, and not, um, you know, not. always very, very like sympathetically, I guess I would say, uh, and how that and how that character ends up sacrificing himself for the people of the lower class who he doesn't look down upon, you know. But then in that very same movie, and this is an interesting touch in that movie as well, is like they're you know they can work through this class and they can work through their ethnicities as well because there's the one character is Jewish and he
Mhm.
they make fun of him a little bit, and there's this tension, right? But they can get past it. But then when they're in the second prison, there's another French prisoner who is black, and they brush him off. You know, he's showing them. He's like, "Look at this art I made," and they don't even answer him. They don't even like
Yeah.
talk. He's not part of the plan, you know. So he's not letting people off the hook. He's showing people for who they are, and
Mhm.
how complicated people are and how messy people actually are. You know, rules of the game is a little bit more complicated, I find. There's so many levels of sincerity and irony blended up. But even in something like that, you know, what is considered to be the definitive kind of satire of the bourgeoisie in many ways. You watch it, you might expect these people to be just awful, but they're not.
Mhm.
They're just regular people too, you know? Yeah, they're a little out of touch, and yeah, there's a lot of irony, and yeah, they're a little monstrous, and they're, you know, they they get their jollies by going out and slaughtering like hundreds of bunnies and whatever, you know. Vegan alert, you know that lady who just
Yeah.
vegan alert. And and even in something like Le Chien, you know, like this guy ends up being a murderer, but he's treated with this sympathy, even though he's committed this awful act, this transgressive act against a lower class person. Um, you know, and then in that too, like the lower class people in Le Chien are not portrayed as virtuous.
Mhm.
You know, inherently virtuous, which is so can be so um, what am I trying to say? Patronizing, right? That in a lot of movies about the lower class, which are invariably made by people in a higher class than them, they have a very patronizing look at that. You know, same within rules of the game. It's not like upstairs, downstairs. Like all the servants are really great working class people. Well, no, like one of them goes nuts and shoots the guy at the end. They're sitting at the table and they're talking shit, and they're talking about in that movie. Oh, I hate working with Jews. You know, they're problematic people too. They're
Yeah.
not you know, bastions of morality or whatever. I just think he treats people as people, like as messy, complicated individuals, whether they're rich or poor, you know. Boudu is a bit of a different example because he's kind of like insane. He's kind of like nuts. And I don't know if we ever necessarily get the moment where it's like um where you get that bit of interiority, like here's how I became the man I am today, you know.
Yeah.
But that works so well in this movie he because he's like I say, this force of nature, you know? You don't need to know why he is the way he is. He just elementally is that way. He's just you can just picture him being born fully formed, you know, as Boudu, the clochard who floats down the river you know, to his new life, you know, who just travels like a tumbleweed.
No, I agree. I think that it's very difficult to have that balance and it feel authentic. And it's a big reason why I don't fully understand why there is a lot of I don't know if it's hate or mostly hesitation towards.
Hesitation, I would say.
Yeah, I think it's hesitation towards his work of people thinking, "Oh, I need to like this," as opposed to just liking it. And I think on the first watch, sometimes you might not like it, but when you take the time to fully understand that this is not someone who is I don't know what people think on the first watch, but whatever you're probably thinking and not gravitating towards is not what the intention likely was.
Mm.
And I'm not saying that everyone has to like his films. Again, it's fully subjective. I'm sure there's people who outrightly dislike it for whatever reason, but yeah, I'd be hard pressed to find someone who doesn't like at least a single Renoir film. There's got to be something you like in at least one of his films. I think.
100%. I think, if people, feel like there's a barrier to entry, like, because they have a preconceived notion of what whether it's a film from the 30s or 40s or even into the early 50s, or if it's because it's French, uh,
Yeah.
if you think that it's going to be stuffy, I think a lot of people think, or that, because some of these are so highly canonized, like that there's a sort of self-important air about them. You're mistaken. Like, and if you need to, if you, as a way of entry, if you need to go to one of his American films, then that's great. Check one of those out, because some of the best American films from the 30s, 40s, 50s into the 60s even are from these great European directors who've come over.
Mhm.
And I mean Fritz Lang especially,
Yep.
Renoir, yeah, for sure. Well, I mean those are the two best probably.
Yeah. What we'll do actually is to wrap things up, we'll recommend a few films that we think that would pair very well
Mhm.
with Boudu for whatever reason. But I'm curious to hear what you think would pair well with this film and why you're creating that pairing or those pairings if you have more than one.
Oh, I do. I always do. Well, okay, yes. There are 2 remakes, like, more official
Yes.
remakes. There's an American remake in 1986, Down and Out in Beverly Hills by Paul Mazursky, filmmaker I'm not
Mhm.
particularly familiar with, but I do like, An Unmarried Woman, I think is a great movie.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
and so he directed this, a pretty broad, like, American comedy starring Nick Nolte as the Voodoo-esque guy, and then Bette Midler and Richard Dreyfuss are the, like, upper class couple who take him in. And talking earlier, about Teorema, which I know sort of has a bit of Voodoo DNA in it, although, quite a bit of different movie. I mean, that's a really fantastic movie. He'd be fine doing those as a double feature too.
Mhm.
Down in Beverly Hills uses a bit of Teorema as well because he really sleeps with everybody. Uh, he sleeps with the kids. Like the adult kids, to be clear.
Oh,
He
okay.
sleeps with he doesn't quite sleep with Richard Dreyfuss. Like it doesn't quite. It's not a full Teorema, but it's pretty close. But I didn't really like it. I probably would have liked it more if I wasn't judging it on the by the Boudu
Yeah.
sort of standard, because it's different and the ending is very different. They sort of like he's on his way to leave the family, and they sort of re-embrace him, and he comes back to stay with them, and it's just not really the same thing. So I wouldn't recommend that. And then in 2005, I did not watch this, but there's an awful looking French remake with Gerard Depardieu as a Boudu type guy, and it's called Boudu. And, um, I
Yeah.
did watch it. I don't talk about, like, French movies, there's a lo I have my own, assumptions about what modern French movies are like. Like, modern French comedies, like the stuff that is broad and is a blockbuster sort of thing. And I look at them, I'm like, "I have no interest in that." Maybe that's culturally specific, in a way that I'm not familiar with, I don't know, but it looks stupid. So you look at this Boudu poster, and it's like looks like a broad comedy. It looks like some silly. And I don't I yeah, so I'm not recommending that. Here's what I am okay, um, definitely you could do some stuff with, like, Charlie Chaplin, right?
Yeah.
The tramp. However, it's a totally different type of tramp. Chaplin, also a great humanist director, for sure. And a lot of similarities to Renoir in that sense. I'm sure they would agree on a lot politically as well. But his tramp, is much kinder and softer, I think, than somebody like
Mhm.
um, I think there's a great movie, a Spanish movie from 1961 called Placido, by Luis Garcia Berlanga, which
Okay.
is about the hypocrisy of the charitable upper classes. It's very funny. It's very dense as far as jokes, and that's a great kind of skewering of this sort of do-gooder mentality. Basically, like this group of wealthy old women get together every year around Christmas or whatever uh, to organize this charitable thing where it's like bring a homeless person to dinner, and it goes awry, and it's very funny, and I think that's along a similar line. Um, from 1991, Life Stinks, which is a maligned and forgotten Mel Brooks movie.
Yeah.
He plays a rich guy who bets his rich friend that he can make it living on the streets in LA for 1 month. I would say this is not a very good movie, but it's a very interesting movie. And it's funny that something like 60 years older, like Boudu, is actually a lot edgier and more nuanced than this. It's
Yeah.
also it's a bit of a curio, like seeing Mel Brooks not make a parody movie. Um, but it's also funny that after he made this and it flopped and nobody liked it, he went back to parody and made two of the stupidest movies of his career, Robin Hood Men of Tights and Dracula Dead and Loving It. But here's my real suggestion. My real suggestion is L'Atalante. I don't know. I
Oh,
never
yeah, oh, yeah.
from
Okay.
1934. So this is like this would be a great double feature. Um,
Mhm.
it's from 1934, only 2 years later. It's directed by Jean Vigo. It's his only feature, and it's starring Michel Simon as an eccentric Voodoo-esque sailor named Père Jules, or Father Jules, or whatever. uh, or Papa Jules. I don't know. Anyway, this is an incredible movie. This is one of those, like, yes, it's the greatest movies of all time type movies. It's also this French poetic realism that is very similar. If you like if you struggled with Boudu because you can't handle that much Boudu and that much Michel Simon, this has him in smaller doses because he's a co-star. He's a supporting character that adds a lot of flavor, but it's not the whole meal, you know? So I would say this is a really good one to watch. They're very similar. They're both very beautiful. Jean Vigo has his own sort of magical realism that Renoir maybe doesn't. But I think that would be a great double feature. And then also 1991, Lovers on the Bridge, the Leos Carax movie, which has very Boudu and Lataland vibes. Very sort of a melding of those two a little bit, but also like a bit edgier, a bit more 90s and whatever. Yeah. That's what I would say. La Land is the one, or you know what, or even Le Chien and Boudu are great. That's a double feature too.
Those are a lot of fantastic recommendations that I highly recommend that everyone note down and add to your watch list if you haven't already seen them. It's funny that you mentioned Carax because he's also part of one of my I have 2 films that I'm recommending. And I'll go through them very quickly. So, I was thinking about Badoo and how uncomfortable he made me, and then for some reason, I've very much thought about, Holy Motors and the lead
Oh.
character in that Leos, Carax film. So, if you want something more modern that's taking up the chaotic energy of Badoo
Mhm.
several notches.
Yeah,
And
big time.
it's definitely less humanistic than Renoir would be, because I think it's very much more, like, heightened emotion than, the realism of Renoir, but it'd be a good double bill, I think, if you want a chaotic night. But then I also thought of when you were talking throughout this episode, I just jotted it down on in my notes as you were chatting about things, and I thought about, like, John Waters, and
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I don't know that he's outright ever talked about Renoir. I haven't ever heard it, but I'm sure he's seen it because I know he's a huge film fan in general,
Must
but
have. Yeah.
I feel like him talking about class relations and Waters
Mhm.
talking about class relations
Uh,
feels very in line. I know it's Waters is a little bit more similar to, like, Cirque's class relations, but I think that
Sure.
there's a Renoir aspect that could be at least benefit from watching them together. So I think even watching something like a Pink Flamingos, which is, like, an intense watch, like, it's
Yeah,
an intense watch. It's
yeah,
way more intense than watching Boudu. But I think that maybe just watching what if a modern American filmmaker can do and talking about people of a certain class and how they are is very interesting.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah, that Pink Flamingos is fun,
yeah.
like, it really is like, what if Boudu was a little bit more organized and had, like, a group of fellow Boudus, you know,
Yeah.
who could, like, torment people on a larger scale, you know?
It sounds like a nightmare,
Y
but
yeah,
I'd be willing to watch it, not
you can
live it.
you can imagine somebody putting a microphone in Boudu's face and saying, like, "What do you want? What's your political position?" And he would say, "Kill everyone now."
Yes,
You know?
very much.
And, like, half mean it. Okay, I
Uh,
like that. That's a good one.
yeah, so I think that if you want something that's driving you to where modern cinema is and how modern cinema can also get it right, but also is a very uncomfortable watch. I think any of the movies you recommended would be a good bet. So I had highly recommend those. But Ben, I have taken up so much of your time so far.
Yeah, I don't mind, it was fun.
No, I had a great time. Genuinely appreciate it. I am so grateful to have to be able to talk to someone who is willing to dive deep into the Hanwal mentality and get deeper with me. So I'm so grateful, Ben, that you came on. Again, I hope to have you back on the show
Yeah,
if you're willing.
anytime, seriously, I love it, yeah, just to plug my own show, but also to again,
Please.
to differentiate, on my show, which I like doing and is very silly and is very different from this show, we talk about movie franchises, and that's fine, there's a lot of stuff like that. I end up we're doing Twilight right now, and I like those movies, they're fun to
Oh,
talk.
yeah.
Well, we watch a lot of garbage, and we talk about a lot of stupid shit, and it's a goofy, dumb show, so I really like coming that you've asked me to come on, and it's very refreshing to get to talk about, movies that, I like, you know?
Yeah.
Movies that are maybe there's a little bit more to chew on than your average, franchise, you know? Uh yeah, I really appreciate it. Anytime, I would love to come on, and also, like, I watch a lot of movies, I know you do too,
Mhm.
and I know, we've been talking about this, but anytime you ask me on for any of these, I will use it as an excuse to do the deep dive, you know?
I
Uh
know.
like, a while back with Cirque, I didn't quite watch as many. I had seen more of his stuff, but, like, oh, I that was a great excuse to finally watch A Time to Love, A Time to Die,
Yes.
and,
Yes.
to a lesser extent, what's the other one? Not Battle Cry, what's it called? The Korean War one? Oh,
Oh,
Battle Hymn.
yeah, I battle
Yeah, which
him.
it's like, whatever, not a great movie, but it's super interesting, like, uh
Yeah.
yeah, so I'm always down. Whatever director you wanna do, I will do it. Just ask.
Hey, it's on record, so
Yeah.
now you're tied to it.
Well,
So I'm very excited for that, and all your show details will be in the show notes for everyone, along with any details or articles that we might have mentioned, books that you might have mentioned for the audience. But thank you so much.
yes, thank you. I'll mention one more thing. I know the last we were talking about, the movie I acted in, Cherub, um,
Yes.
and when it might become available. I didn't know back then. Now I know, I can tell you on the show. February 12th, this coming
Okay.
Friday, I'm not sure when this will come out, but as of February 12th, you can watch it for free on Vimeo, and I will send you the link. Um,
Please.
I mean, you can also just Google it, but I'll send you the link to put in the notes.
Mhm.
And
Please.
so, yeah, please, you can watch that. You talk about a sub 90-minute film. It is like
Mhm.
75 minutes. If you wanna see me, act in a movie, that I think is actually pretty good. Yeah,
Wow,
check it
that's
out. Terrible.
fantastic.
Yeah.
No, please do send us a link, so I'll put that in the show notes for sure. Seeing Faces in Movies is an official podcast of the Royal Film Club. It's hosted and edited by Felicia and Maroney. If you like what you heard, let us know at seeingfacesinmovies.com or send us an email at seeingfacesinmovies@gmail.com. And while you're at it, please subscribe and rate the show wherever you listen to your podcast. And stay tuned for our next episode on The River. Watch more movies, and we'll catch you next time.